right, welcome to Moving the Rock. I am really excited today to have Patrick Baines, founder and CEO of PeopleLinx, with me on the phone, and we're going to address one of the most challenging issues facing sales teams today. And thankfully, Patrick, you have all the answers, and I'm really excited to hear all those. But more than that, you've got some wisdom to share with us. I'm happy to have you here, man. Welcome.
Thank you, James. Good to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, awesome. So, Patrick, for our audience, give us a sense of your background, what you do, what PeopleLinx does. That'll get us kicked off on our topic today.
Sure. So the story here is I was an early employee at LinkedIn in 2007. I left LinkedIn a couple of years later to close a gap, which was a tremendous number of companies, almost all companies and all sales teams didn't know how to use LinkedIn as a tool for them to be more productive, to build their brands, to build their networks. And so I launched a company in my 20s, raised a lot of venture capital, and brought that solution to market. And along that path, I learned a lot about what it takes to build a company, to build a sales team. We were able to fortunately hire some of the most seasoned executives in our region in Philadelphia. And I just learned a tremendous amount. So we sold that company at the end of my 20s. And when I 10 years ago launched PeopleLinx, I thought, what can I take to market without outside capital and without needing to bring on all of these investors? And what would be kind of the most valuable thing I could take to market? And it ended up being lead generation and helping companies tap into all of the different technologies, best practices, and ultimately systems that you can put together into a sales organization to have not just a productive sales team, but a predictable flow of leads, a predictable sales process. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years is we systematically come into organizations, help them define their go-to-market plan, really define and prioritize targets, get their prospect data and list together and do some data hygiene, help them really sharpen their go-to-market messaging and how they introduce themselves and get their prospective clients excited, all the way through managing and scaling up sales outreach, sales follow-up, lead scoring, and getting sales reps shifting to focus on higher value activities and not spending their time doing these very lower important but lower value manual tasks. And so that's what the background story is here. Is I've been for almost 20 years now closing gaps in the market where organizations can move faster, move smarter, do things more efficiently. And now with PeopleLinx, it's really about the sales process, focused on scaling up sales activities in a very targeted and high quality way, and moving sales reps up the food chain, so to speak, in terms of how they're spending their time on these much more critical, valuable activities where they can move the rock in their organizations and start to have a bigger impact. And so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and for me, when I hear the phrase lead generation, I just think back to the 50 or so invites I get on LinkedIn every day, trying to seduce me into whatever the latest version of lead gen is. What I love about what you're doing and why I'm so involved with the company is that you really take this to a strategic level. So you'll do it better than I could, but frame the strategic challenge that your clients have with regard to the decisions they make around sales and supporting sales, because I think this is an important place to start the conversation.
Yeah, and I do think it's funny, like lead generation has almost become like a dirty word. It's like people just have this connotation that it's a scammy process and people are going to be spraying and praying. And I don't think that the stuff that you see on LinkedIn, makes my stomach turn, because it's the worst example of it. It's these blindly sent invitations, and then if you accept one, these terrible follow-ups. And so yeah, it's really become an unfortunate arena in the sense that it's flooded with a lot of poor practitioners and people out there, because the tools are available, the technologies are out there, and anybody can tap into them and try to slap a system together and say they're going to be generating leads for you. And the reality is there's a lot more involved in it. than just connecting with people or sending emails or blasting people. That's not going to do it. And so when you think about doing it strategically, the key in my mind is that you want to do the same activities that the best salesperson on your team is already doing, or that you want them to do more of. It should be driving the same, what I call a core sales activity, which is not connecting to people on LinkedIn and then following up with messages. Like, that's not how you would go to market in reality. So why would you do that with technology, right? To go to market in reality, you're not going to blast 20,000 people with a generic message and then blast them again. Like, that's not how you want to put your best foot forward. That's not how you want to meet your ideal customer. So why would you do that at scale, right? And so that's, a lot of people have missed the ball in the sense that it's not about doing something crazy outside of the sales process. It's actually about looking at what are those core activities that, when you're really thoughtful about identifying and reaching out and pursuing your ideal client, what are those core activities that you would do anyway, and how do you take those core activities and kind of polish and improve them, and then how do you put them into a system and use technology to drive the same activities at scale? And that scale doesn't have to mean 20,000, 10,000 prospects. It just might mean hundreds or a few hundred for each rep per week, and taking it off their plate so they can move into other areas. And so I can give you some examples and we can go further down into that path, but that's really what, in my mind, an effective lead gen program looks like, is taking core activities, ones that you stand behind, that you're proud of, in terms of how you identify who your ideal client is, and get really specific in that profile or profiles. What is the right message to engage that target, or the various targets with, that you would stand behind, that you feel good about? And then how do you use technology, because there's a lot of them out there, to take those activities and, in a really high quality way, be able to drive them so your team doesn't have to spend all their time doing that, and then they can move on to scored leads and taking meetings and working with folks that are much more qualified and that are further down the funnel. And so that's kind of how I think about this strategically, is you want to be thoughtful, you want to drive those human activities, you just want to do it in a way that is at a greater scale, and that your team's not having to put a lot of their calories into every week,
Right.
and so forth.
Right. Well, so when we talk about, so I've been selling tech the first 15 years of my career. I sold tech, and I help now lots of clients do that today. And the promise of technology isn't that it solves all your needs, right? The promise of tech is that it delivers automation that can create that scale for you. But if you're scaling or automating a broken process, or you're going to market without a deep enough level of wisdom, then you're just going to create poor results at scale, which is what a lot of organizations are stuck with. So it seems to me that you guys bring to market, one, the wisdom of how do you help a marketing team, branding and marketing team, think about a segment of the marketplace that we can go after. What do they already know about that market? How they make decisions? What kind of challenges they're facing today that can be captured and communicated in the context of, for example, an email? And then how do I create scale? How do I send that message at scale, but also then support a sales team that has better things to do with their time than develop lists, test messaging, and then send that messaging out? So it seems like you fit right in that sweet spot between sales and marketing. And you're also a solution that doesn't require me to necessarily go out and hire an SDR or another body that's not going to create necessarily scale, but it's going to create actually a level of overhead for me that additional overhead that I'm going to have to earn a return on investment on. Do I have that right?
You do, and I'll also add to it from another angle that I think folks can grasp really quickly, which is, particularly in B2B, our organizations, our businesses are built off of the same metrics. Like, it doesn't change universally. So you have to understand kind of what those metrics are and how to drive them. But here's what it looks like. The number of clients that you brought on this week, they typically come from the amount of meetings you had with prospective clients the weeks prior. Those meetings typically come from a set of sales activities that your team had to do to generate those meetings. you can actually break down what those activities are, right? They had to research a prospect, they had to write an email, they had to pick up the phone, they had to do these things. And your numbers, which is this is where sales managers get involved, are managing the numbers and managing the productivity of those SDRs or those AEs. Like, how many calls are we making? Who are we going after? How many calls to get a meeting? And then so forth. And how many meetings did we get this week? But backing up to the top of the funnel, you have to drive those sales activities. And when you can do that in a quality way, and again, augmenting what your team is already doing, and they can go from sending 50 emails to sending 500 and following up, not just one time, but following up 3 or 4 times with those prospects. And then instead of making cold calls and making 100 cold calls, they're making 100 warm calls on people that are already engaging and that are scored. You just improve the entire, not just the quantity, but you improve the quality of your sales activity that your team is driving. And so, with a system like the one we implement, or the one that many companies are doing in their own homegrown sense, or running themselves, it's about that. It's about taking those top of funnel numbers, not just increasing them, but doing it in a really high quality way where it's augmenting the stuff your team would already do, and moving those human resources to mid funnel sales activity, not top of funnel outreach and follow up and those types of things.
Right. I think that's where a lot of people get, and this is kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? Where a lot of people get stuck is tech, right? Technology allows us to do more, to automate processes, and anyone can go buy that tech today. The challenge still remains applying it in an appropriate way. It's still, the secret sauce is still in how well you understand your market, how well you understand the buyers that you're targeting, how well you understand the problems they're facing, how well you understand the impact you can have on them, how well you communicate and position that impact, and how you do that in the context of creating a relationship that can turn into a conversation, that can turn into a sale. All of that art has to come along with the science of that tech. And a lot of organizations that we work with buy the tech and assume that the wisdom, the art's going to come along with it. And they find themselves having to now backtrack, figure all that out, while they're paying significant subscriptions on a tech stack that really isn't moving the needle.
I think you're referring to shelfware, which is, I heard that term recently, which is, you've invested in all this technology, and even in some cases, people get off to a strong start, but then they revert back to their habits, the ways that they have been going to market. So there's all kinds of different scenarios, but yeah, it's more than technology. It is taking things that you want your team to be driving, and how do you put that into a system, and how do you do it the right way. But yeah, there's the whole shelfware issue out there, and then there's also just this idea of like, can sales folks themselves run their own marketing programs? Like, many of them can't. So then you're right, you do need this other kind of entity. You need somebody, a practitioner. It comes down to like anything else, it comes down to the execution, but you do need somebody, oftentimes not just a sales rep, but somebody to implement these technologies and create the system and be there, making sure that the engine's running smoothly, optimizing it, getting the feedback, making the iterations, doing all of that stuff. So it's definitely more than tech, and it takes the devil's in the details. It takes somebody who's really got they're not only able to put together a system like this, they're able to keep their finger on the pulse of it. They're able to have that feedback cycle, help optimize it, and so forth. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. But the good news is it costs less than a salesperson, and it can apply to many salespeople. It can be executed across an organization. So the promise of these systems, the promise of the technology is there. It's huge. And it's a clear ROI when you just take it from a number standpoint and look at filling your funnel. But there is work to be done, and it has to be done well.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that organizations today are really struggling with is, if my current environment is not optimized and I can't just go buy tech that fixes it, then I have to rely on the art of the individual or team that I hire to get me where I want to go, and evaluating the competency of somebody I just met, right, or somebody I don't know, is really difficult. It's really daunting. So I've been involved in the process where you're meeting somebody from outside your organization, an external consultant or a service provider who says they have the wisdom to help you and get you where you want to go, but the barrier to entry is high. And then the other thing about marketing is that there's no exact science for anyone. So testing is always going to be involved. So if someone's a believer, right? If someone understands the value of of supporting sales team, high price sales team with a go-to-market strategy that's going to relieve them of a lot of the low level uh, administrative work that they don't need to be doing, so they can do the high level work they're paid to do. And they recognize that there's a gap between marketing and sales in terms of taking the positioning and messaging and what they know about the marketplace and turning it into a systematic way to create connections and drive conversations. How do you then help someone take the next step, right? How do I figure out whether or not you're one of those hacks that just, put up their shingle or just read a blog and now they're an expert, versus someone who's got the chops to actually make it happen? What kind of mindset do I have to have? What kind of questions do I have to have? How do I evaluate those kinds of solutions?
Well, I mean, I'll back up to the first piece, which is look at the core activities that you know that you want to drive. And when you're looking at solutions out there that don't fit the way that you would go to market anyway, in terms of how the program or the technology would integrate, right? Like, so in other words, if your team isn't already going to market using LinkedIn and having some success, messaging or connecting on LinkedIn and doing those things, like, why would you go and run a program to do that for them, right? So it helps if you've already got a go-to-market motion, a sales process, a prospecting process that's working. And then you can find tools and systems out there that align with that. So, I mean, I would start there and sort of think about what is good, what fits into what we already know works. Like, this doesn't mean don't experiment. Absolutely experiment, even experiment with new markets and new approaches and things. But look at doubling down on and on what's already working, and then have those experiments be like 10 to 20% of your overall sales activity. And when they work, then increase them a bit. So I would start there, start with what you know is working. And then beyond that, when you're looking out at the market of solutions, I say this for our customers as well. It's like, you need to have, when you commit to a go-to-market motion, like you really commit to it, you need to have the full stack of what I consider to be like customer marketing materials. So and this isn't when you evaluate potential vendors, potential partners, they should have this too. You need it for the markets you're going after. The vendors, they should have it for you. And that's, do they have proof of success in your space, right? Do they work with other people like you? Do they have case studies on their website? Do they have logos? Can you speak to those customers? Do they have references? Can they speak anecdotally to how this is going to apply to your business? And that doesn't mean don't do business with them if they don't have that, but know that those are important aspects to vetting a solution and knowing that it's going to work, particularly if it's a big investment in terms of time and resources and money and things that you have to put into this. Look for those things in your partners. Do they have that credibility, those credentials, and can you see it? Do you have that comfort and trust? Because it's going to be easier the second time around if you're the fifth MSP or the fourth fintech company that they've worked with, and you can see how this worked for another customer. You can even speak to that other customer. That's going to de-risk that investment, but also just make sure that the approach, the methodology, the system that you're looking at fits into something that already works for your organization. And that system may give you room to experiment, but make sure it works with how you go to market already, and that you can see it fitting into those existing processes. You're gonna be much more successful, much lower risk in terms of taking on that investment.
No, I love that. And so it sounds like what you're describing to me is more of a partnership with whoever you work with. I think, again, if I was advising a client on how to think about this, one of the big things I would also challenge them with is their expectations for the relationship, right? So a lot of folks want growth, and I don't know anyone who doesn't have, big dreams for growth, right? Of course, we can think about healthy growth, but if we can grow in a healthy way, we'll take as much growth as we can get typically. Um, but a lot of us forget about the trade-off between, right, those short-term tactical wins and translating those short-term tactical wins into something that can pay off long-term, that can create scalable growth. And that requires an investment up front, in time and effort, testing, and so forth. Uh, I think one of the challenges in the marketplace today is that with all these, um, get rich quick schemes out there that are attached to lead gen, a lot of folks have an expectation that this stuff should pay off right away, um, versus giving it some time to play out. Um, how would you counsel someone to think about resetting their mindset about their expectations for this kind of investment?
Well, it's a really key point here because like I've seen everything where I bring on a client, I tell them exactly what we do. I go into detail. I even I spell it out clearly in our sales process, or as clearly as I think I can. And then you get to that evaluation milestone, 4 months, 6 months in, even 2 months in, a check-in, and suddenly we're misaligned in terms of what we were expecting. And like I don't know where it doesn't happen all the time, but it just can happen. And so I do think some of that is in the sales process, and no matter what you're buying, it really is important that people are aligning expectations, that you've been clear about what they are for you as the solution or the provider, and that the same with the customer, and that there's some alignment there. And I think even to an extent, like having that clearly documented, so you've got something to look back at and go, hey, this was what we expected to do, and so forth. And I'll tell you, I have this conversation not that often, but it's regular. It definitely is a pattern where, I had a call with a client 3 months in the other day. We've gotten them 20 something, leads, and it took us set up and ramp up. And, a lot of those leads have come in the last month or two. And they're saying, well, we haven't closed anything yet. So we're not really not sure if we can continue to move forward. We haven't closed the deal yet. I said, guys, I didn't expect you to close the deal. I'd be thrilled if you did. I don't know what your sales cycles are. I don't know how that works, but my expectation was to show you that we could drive up these sales activities in a quality way and get you these leads and meetings. And that's, I feel like we've done what I expected, which was to prove out the efficacy of this solution, this approach. And so I feel like we've delivered on our side. And they're like, yeah, but we really could use something to close. And I think that's great, but I mean, isn't that a little outside of my purview, right? And so I even offered. I said, look, we offer this for some clients. Like, would you like to speak to a sales consultant and look at your sales process and see if they can help you, maybe improve your close ratios and things. And so it's interesting though, and I have that conversation comes up again, not every client, but it just comes up sometimes where it's like, well, I actually thought we did our job, and now I'm, I thought you'd be happy with that, but along the way, our customer success team did their job, but the expectations when they were really evaluating how the program went, the expectations changed somewhere along the way, and and it may not even be their expectations, it may be their boss who's saying, well, how's it going? Well, the boss might only care about closed deals, right? And so they're saying, well, we got this. And so I think it's just expectation setting again, no matter what you do, it's got to be something that in the sales process is clear, in the onboarding process is clear, and that everybody's aligned to that. But at the same time, those things like anything else, they're never going to be perfect, and things can change along the way. Narratives can change, expectations can change because there's could be pressure from other parts of the organization. But I think you have to be clear about them up front, particularly if you're going to be the one buying one of these types of solutions. And I get these emails constantly. People say, I'll work with you, but it needs to be on a performance basis. Like, we'll only pay per lead we get. Well, I can't do that. I can't, it's actually not physically impossible. It's monetarily, fiscally impossible. I got to invest a tremendous amount of resources into getting this program up and running. And even in this scenario where we generated all these leads for this client, and that may have been a better ROI for us, I just can't keep track of it. And so it's like, that's one that I could end the conversation very quickly and go, look, for these reasons, we can't do this type of performance-based sort of pay per lead. I am willing to do a pilot where I lose my job at the end of a few months if it doesn't work, and that's performance-based, right? Just like when you hire somebody. But in any case, it's a conversation that needs to be had, and I would say don't tiptoe around it. Have the conversation, be clear about expectations on both sides, and make sure that they can be delivered on. Otherwise, you'll find yourself in a tough situation
Yeah.
later down the road.
Yeah, that performance-based approach is a response to probably a disappointment over and over again from hiring folks that just didn't deliver. But what you're talking about is bringing up another challenge, I think, for the buyer, right? If your lead generation system's not working, or if lead generation isn't to the point where you want it to be, then there's a challenge inside your organization that has to be fixed. There's something that you're not doing right. There's a gap in awareness that exists in the process you've built that has to be filled. Who is going to go through the process of understanding your current process, putting their wisdom to the test, and figuring out what that gap is, and then figuring out the best way to fill it? If you're going to market looking for help in this regard, you've got to recognize the fact that you need help because there is a lack of wisdom or knowledge inside the organization that has to be filled by someone. So you've got to be willing to make an investment. The challenge is making an investment in someone who's got the credibility to really help you out and willing to create those milestones that allow you to mitigate the risk related to, or as much as possible related to, figuring that out. So what I would say to buyers out there or shoppers of this type of solution is forget about, return on investment is critical. It's a critical requirement of this process. But the first thing to think about is, what can this partner, this outsourced partner, teach you about what you're doing wrong? What can they teach you about the process you've built that isn't performing? So you can test their wisdom and then get a better sense as to whether or not an increased investment over a longer period of time is actually going to pay off for you.
Yeah, no, that's right. It is one of those things where you have to be, as the buyer, you always have to have your guard up a little bit, but at the same time, you can't be afraid to take a little bit of risk. There's always going to be risk in every hire. I think, in fact, just to get specific to not the lead gen space at large, but to a solution like ours, many of these things are a fraction of the risk of hiring a salesperson. You hire a salesperson, you're betting all on them and on their sales, how they're gonna perform under your sales process, or how they're gonna perform at large. And it can take months to find out if that person's actually going to be able to deliver or not. A system like this, you know what you're getting, what activities it's going to drive, how it's going to fit into your sales force. And as long as those check boxes are delivered on, then you're going to have an impact. And with a salesperson, you kind of, those check boxes are invisible for the most part. You can sit there next to them when they're on the phone, or you can read their emails and you can manage their activity, but it's hard to do that continuously and at scale. And so that's why I feel like, when you're building a sales team, you're trying to scale your sales operation, looking to these types of systematic approaches, these types of technologies. It's not a choice of if it's a fit for us. It's just a choice of like how we're going to do this, because you want to have those benefits. You want to have a sales team that's empowered with them to de-risk throwing humans and human capital at scaling your operations, because that's expensive and it's riskier.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I love it. And so this brings me to a huge point that I want to wrap up with, this idea of the conversation, the buying conversation, right? To your point, even if we're recording calls, and it's not always legal to record calls in every state. Or you're sitting next to the rep while they're talking. And today that's even less likely because most reps are virtual. So the idea of being able to understand what reps are saying on the phone while they're talking to folks, what's working, what's not working, that still is largely a mystery, as you're saying. One of the things that I love about a program like the one you're talking about is that if I'm leveraging email and I'm actually typing out the conversation, Um, Instead of just, throwing stuff against the wall to see if it sticks, which is what reps do, right? If a rep isn't told what works, they'll make it up until something works. Oftentimes we're rolling the dice to figure out if we're going to, or to see if we're actually going to find something that works in the first 3 to 6 months of our employment, especially when an employer says, hey, here's your market, here's your phone, here's your computer, go get them Tiger. But in the context of the work you do, I can test those conversational elements in the email, and I can run those and document and adjust them in a documented and very data centric and measured way, so that when something hits, I can then transfer that conversational piece, that positioning or messaging, right back to the reps. So now the reps know exactly what's working and what's not working. So they have this ability now to test at scale and be informed about what they should be talking about and how they should be opening up conversations, how they can create enough anticipation for the second conversation. What do you think about that? Do you feel like that kind of data-centric approach to testing and optimizing messaging actually is a core deliverable of what you do?
It absolutely, and I think that's one of the keys too, is like, not all of these lead gen solutions are created equal. Not all of the systems, the technologies, and so forth, and the providers, they're not all doing it the best way with all of the best practices, or the visibility for their clients to actually know what's happening and how it's going, and to see the data, and to see how the system's working. I mean, I think the bulk of the solutions out there are kind of in a black box where they say, yeah, we'll do it. We'll pound phones. We're going to email folks. We're going to do all this stuff, but you're just going to get the meetings, and we're not going to kind of tell you what we're doing and how it's going. And, we're going to spin up another domain, or we're just going to cold call. And then, the people, the leads can be mixed quality, mixed expectations, there can be all these things, but I think all those promises of what you described, and getting that visibility, and to get all those kind of benefits, they're out there. They're there. You just need to be, looking at a solution that you can have all those benefits. And we do implement, not only design the system with you, but we implement it into your organization. You get all of the visibility, and you get the relationship where, when we're iterating, we're working with you to improve, not just who we're targeting and if we need to adjust targets, but what's the message, what is the open rate, what's the response rate, what's the lead count, and managing and optimizing that the same way that you would want to do it. And it kind of goes back to my original point when we started this conversation, is you look at this market of lead gen solutions or prospecting systems, or however you want to think about it. Look at it as, how would I want to do this anyway? How
Right.
should we be going to market anyway? What should those activities be? How would we measure it anyway? Think about that ideal scenario for your organization and find the solutions that align with that. If you're out there talking to providers in the lead gen space, and they're doing things or talking about solutions and ways that they can do it that aren't how you would want to go to market anyway, then it's not a fit. And the chances of it working out are not going to work out. Now, you can get lucky, and you may even get lucky for a short term or a long term, and that can happen. And I'm not saying there's not great providers out there. I'm just saying, my big litmus test, and my push to everybody as you thinking about this stuff, is drive the activities you would do anyway. Look for solutions that you would stand behind, or that your go to market activities would fall in line with anyway, and that they just are going to help you scale it up and get other benefits along the way, like some automations, or some insights, some data insights, or some scored leads, or some technology that moves your sales rep to mid funnel activities versus filling the top of their funnel, and all that stuff. But it should be things that you would do anyway, that you would
Right.
stand behind, and that's where you're going to have the most success. Not something that's far removed from your sales process already, and far removed from how you go to market, that you're just sort of going, well, LinkedIn is hot. I suppose if we blast 1,000 people on LinkedIn a day, something can happen. Like,
Right.
do that
Right.
anyway. Don't do that on LinkedIn. Just
Right.
don't go outside of it. That doesn't mean don't experiment, but follow where you go anyway.
Right. So the message is, pay attention to what works. Don't fall in love or be attracted by that bright, shiny object. Focus on, at least focus to begin with, on the systems and the processes that work. And then look for partners who can take those processes and systems and things work, and increase them at scale in an effective way, a data-centric way, a way that you can track, that can be that can inform best practices and that you can evaluate as to whether or not they're working or not very quickly. Um, that kind of iteration, I think it makes a lot of sense, which leads me back to your comment about the fact that you're offering pilots. I love the fact that, and I know that you invest so much up front. That pilot is you taking on some risk because you're investing up front. You're not getting the long-term guarantee. But the idea here, to me, is that's another way that you can test whether or not somebody believes in a partnership. Are they willing to work and put some skin in the game to make sure that they can find something that works with you, that you can then decide to partner together and create scale on? And if you've been doing that for 10 years, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah. No, we're happy to take on some risk ourselves, and at the same time, from a but just to not to reactivate parts of the conversation, but if I meet a client and I'm not sure if it's going to work out for them, I'll be transparent. Like, hey, this is not a category we've worked with before, and I think it could work in this, but you know, I don't have that experience in that category. And so I can set those expectations right. But when I meet a client and I go, look, man, you're our 10th MSP, you're our 5th university fundraising department, you're this, and I know it. I'm like, I will take on some risk because I know how this is going to play out when we get going. But yeah, you should also in this space be able to try it before you buy it. And make sure you get an out, protect yourself, but ultimately, look for people that you like, trust, feel comfortable with, and for systems and solutions that fit in with ways that you would go to market and kind of the ways that you operate today, and you'll do just fine for the
I
most
love
part.
it. I love it. So you mentioned categories. You mentioned MSPs and university fundraisers. What are you doing with universities?
Well, what we found is a number of things. So one, just backing up, you know, it, it how you and we do this with for profits too. Is when you create a go to market plan, you want to be as effective as possible, right? So you want to always define targets where you think you're going to get the most traction. When we work with a for profit or a nonprofit, one area that we always look before we think about net new targets is what existing data do you have, right? What are some of the existing relationships you have, whether they're past leads, past clients, marketing qualified leads, data where people already know who you are and they already kind of have shown some consideration, and all you have to do is go out and reactivate that relationship. And so many of our clients, and we have one of the largest mortgage brokers in the country, and they're sitting on literally hundreds of thousands of pre-approved mortgage leads that they still haven't found their home, so that to buy the home to purchase. So we're reactivating a lot of their leads. Well, universities, as it turns out, they already know who their ideal client is or who they want to target. It's their alumni. And so it's this huge pool of existing data where we don't have to go out and introduce ourselves and try to get them interested. We just have to go out there and reactivate these relationships and bring these folks back to a conversation with the university. And so it has become a really sweet spot for our solution in terms of the impact we can drive, because it's an easier message. It's, hey, James, I want to catch up. Congrats on your success. Love to hear how you've been these past years. And so with universities, we're managing a lot of their outreach and follow-up and their process for how they go to engage alumni. And it's doing incredibly well because there's already a relationship there. It's existing. It's got history. And so folks are very responsive. We're seeing 30% response rates on fundraising outreach. We're seeing numbers like 1 in 8 booking appointments with the alumni university. So it's a great category for us. We're excited about it. But that's what we look for in customers, is who's got a great value prop, who's got some of these assets we can work with. So we can, just like you would for yourself, we want to de-risk the whole investment and the whole program and see where we can make the biggest impact. And so that's been a sweet spot for us for sure. And I think other nonprofits and folks who have these donor bases that they're manually trying to activate are going to also be a great fit because they already have a community there. And so even for profits, think about who your community is. Think about what data you have that already lives on your side, where they already know who you are. They're already qualified, and point a system like this at reactivating those as well. And you'll find it's a good use of your go-to-market energy.
Outstanding. Thank you. I wish we had more time, Patrick. This is great stuff. And I hope the listeners got some value out of this. Give us a sense how we can get a hold of you if the listener is interested in learning more, my man.
Well, You can speak with my bodyguard or my personal assistant. They'll no, I'm just kidding. So I'm fully accessible. You can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect, send me a note on there. PeopleLinx.com. You can find some of my contact details on our website as well. But feel free to reach out. You can also connect with James Royes himself, and he's got access to my personal calendar. So yeah, easy to get a hold of. Thanks for the conversation, James. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's Patrick Baines, Baynes at PeopleLinx with an X at the end. Thanks, Patrick. Always a pleasure. Thanks for the knowledge, and I look forward to next time. Take good care.
Cheers.